You are Locked On Braves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Braves POSTCAST, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Grant McAuley, Jake Mastroianni with you in the second half. Welcome to half number 2. Not so much mathematically speaking, but in the larger sense, the Braves, after a rainout on Friday, were finally able to get that second half of baseball underway, and it happened with a twin bill against the Cardinals, which they split with a dramatic comeback in Game 1 and a game that just kind of got away from them late in the second contest as the Cardinals were able to split things up. We'll talk all about those two games, of course, get you set up for Sunday's finale and get you set up for what is going to be, I think, a very fast journey through the end of the month of July where a lot is going to happen in the lead up to the trade deadline. So we got a lot to get to. Before we start, though, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta on YouTube. Also, subscribe to Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcast. We appreciate you making us your first listen of the day. And today's episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah, the right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your rivals. Check out Booking.com for your stay today. Well, Jake, it's been a minute since we sat down to talk about the Atlanta Braves in action. They had to wait an extra 24 hours or maybe a little bit less than that, but had to play 2 in 1 day to get this thing started. Kind of a mixed bag for Atlanta, but still a chance to take a series from the Cardinals, and that would be a good way to start the second half.
It would be. You certainly want to win series. That is always the goal. And on double hitters, you want to make sure, or double headers, you want to make sure you at least split. You win that first one, so you guarantee that. Thought, as you said beforehand, when we were talking, maybe a little bit of magic in that second one, but not quite meant to be. But they do at least get the split, as you said, set themselves up to win the series on Sunday.
Yeah, and that I think is going to be the important thing, is winning as many of these series as you possibly can heading down the stretch. The Braves do have control of the wild card race in all of the National League with that top spot. I'm sure they'd still like to make a run at the Phillies. That's no real surprise, but first things first, you got to handle your own business. You got to win the games that are in front of you, and the Braves had to play 2 games in 1 day today. A 3-2 victory in Game 1 in 10 innings. Ozzie Albies delivering the sac fly to win it. Eddie Rosario back in a big-time way. We'll talk about him more in a minute. Then Game 2, the Braves, they flexed their muscles, but a lot of solo homers, and the Cardinals, they just pulled away late. It looked like the Braves might have that chance to make some kind of a fantastic finish out of it, but it just wasn't to be after the 9th inning that the Cardinals were able to put up and scoring 3 more times to take a 1-run game and win it handily by that 9-5 score. Let's talk a little bit about that comeback and extras. We might as well start with the good stuff. It felt like the Braves were still searching, trying to find it offensively. I know that's going to be something we'll have to get into more as the show goes on as well. But Eddie Rosario had to be happy to be back at Truist Park. A big-time homer to tie things up in Game 1. Another homer in Game 2. I know that the Braves don't have all the answers that they want, but they were hoping Eddie was going to be able to step in and do some things for him. And he certainly did a couple of things here on this Saturday.
He did, and look, that's big for Eddie Rosario because the Braves are out there looking for a bat for the outfield. So Eddie Rosario's got a very limited time frame here to prove himself. Obviously, the Braves are familiar with him, know what he's been able to do in the past, but it's a chance for Eddie Rosario to step up and maybe show them that he can be here, that he can be part of this team and deserves it. And outings like this, days like this, certainly prove that. As we know, Eddie can be clutch, and he came up pretty clutch in Game 1 of this series, Game 2 as well, with a big home run to bring them within a run of that game, but more so that first game where the offense was just dead for most of the game until Eddie Rosario was able to sneak one into the chop house.
I think there's something to it with, both a team and a player that are comfortable in a certain place. And I know he spent that first 2, nearly 3 months with Washington, and that was just a product of, where the Braves were with their roster moves over the course of the winter. It wasn't so much that they just didn't want Eddie Rosario back. I think it's they just didn't want to pick up that $9 million option. And even after a 20-plus homer season a year ago, Eddie, it took him a while to find some regular work. But I think the Braves, knowing what they had there, and Eddie knowing what he had in Atlanta, what he was a part of, I think there's something to be said for that reunion, bringing those two sides back together. And like you said, there may be more moves in the offing, but you might as well find out what you have here.
Yeah, and why not? I mean, some of the other options that you've had and ran out there weren't able to give you too much. So why not go back to somebody that you're familiar with? And look, I think there's something to playing with a team that you have that familiarity with, that you feel comfortable with. I mean, we see it with Jesse Chavez. He is the ultimate example. He goes and pitches for anybody else, and he can't get it done. But with the Atlanta Braves, he's one of the best relief pitchers in baseball. So, I think there is something a little bit to that, coming back to a team where you feel comfortable, the guys in that clubhouse, and maybe there's just a little bit of extra magic in there.
Yeah, maybe so. And again, just getting comfortable in that place, with teammates that you know all too well from being here and being a big part of last few years worth of teams with the Braves. And you hear Eddie talk about it after the game every time. And really, even when he came back over initially, he just feels blessed to be able to put on an Atlanta Braves uniform. And you like to have as many guys around that feel that way as well about their opportunity to play on this team. Braves did a little bit of manufacturing of runs in the 10th inning to win things. Zach Short got down a sacrifice bunt, was actually the second sack bunt of the day for the Braves. First time they'd done that since August of 2021. Of course, pitchers were still in charge of their own batting at that time. But either way, the Braves using those, I feel like the small ball tactics, if you will, that, Jake, has to be kind of an extension of just knowing the value of every single run and where they've been this year, and the fact that, hey, it might not be reinventing the game. In fact, it's kind of, if you pardon the phrase, kicking it old school, but it certainly worked out for Atlanta on this day. It put them in position to win a game, and that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, it's good to see it. I mean, obviously, you want a lineup 1 to 9 that is capable that you feel comfortable with just swinging away. That's what the Braves were able to do last couple of years. But I think it's more of just a situation of the lineup and where we're at. And this lineup struggling to score, and it is so banged up. And you have some guys at the bottom of the order who you feel like can get those small things done and bunt a runner over if needed to. So it is good. We've talked about it. They got the home runs in game 1 too with Eddie Rosario, but they got more so in game 2. That is the Braves game, but we've talked about it. They need to find other ways to try to manufacture and score runs, especially when you just need to push one across. So it's great to see them be able to execute that when they need to.
Yeah, and the bottom half of the lineup has had such a hard time. I know I talked about this before the All-Star break, just how just rough it has been. And if you go and break down the stats for the team, I believe it was around a 215 batting average from spots 6 through 9 in the order. That's not what you're looking for. And it was right around or just under 30 home runs. And that was over the first 90 plus games of the season. That's just a far cry from where the Braves were a year ago. So I think it kind of speaks to what you're talking about, where you are in the lineup. And it also speaks to where the Braves have been this season with runs so much harder to come by. It's one thing to talk about regression and the fact that that's typically going to be a part. It's another thing to say, well, maybe you set the bar awfully high in 2023, but we've talked about this more times than I think we want to, Jake. Finding the answers for what ails the 2024 Braves offense is one of the most difficult things I think I have ever tried to do as a sports broadcasting and media professional.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, it really doesn't add up to this Braves offense that was historic last year, brings back pretty much everybody, same hard hit numbers basically as last year. And it's just not getting the results that you are accustomed to seeing. Now it is more strikeouts, especially, over the last several months. And, that is part of it too. And something they did a great job of last year is being able to put the ball in play a little bit more. But it's just, again, we're all searching for the answers, and we certainly haven't found it yet. But hopefully the baseballs are flying a little bit better. Again, we saw it in game 2. We've seen it across Major League Baseball in the month of July. The home run to fly ball ratio is back up to where it was this time last year. So hopefully that's a huge benefit for the Braves, that they're going to be able to get that going again. But again, with this offense, it's just you're searching for ways to score runs, and any way that you can get it done. Hopefully the home run ball does come back for them, but being able to do those little things as well certainly helps.
Yeah, it definitely does. Putting the bat on the ball obviously helps. You mentioned the strikeout rate certainly up. Braves, though, leading Major League Baseball in average exit velocity, have been at least in the very top 5 in Major League Baseball as far as barrel percentage is concerned. They just have not had that same fortune they had a year ago. I don't know what more you can really say about it than sometimes it's just the way it goes. But either way, the Braves have got to find ways to figure it out. And by being maybe just a little bit more, out of necessity, utilizing those bunts to get another 90 feet was something that the Braves felt that they needed to do. And as it turned out, it was a pretty good call as well in that game. Charlie Morton was pitching well in that opener, 6 innings of 1-run ball for him. Bryce Elder, though, 27th man for the Braves in this doubleheader. What an up and down game, too, it was for him. He had the strikeout stuff working. He got caught in one really big inning, gave up a couple of home runs overall on the start. It was a real Jekyll and Hyde performance from Bryce Elder. We'll get to Charlie Morton a little bit later, but for Bryce, it was one of those things where you look at it and you thought, oh, well, this is what's been ailing him. And then there are other times in the game where you look at it and you think, man, why can't he bottle this and do this more?
Yeah, it's a frustrating start for Bryce Elder, who got thrust into the rotation, probably wasn't, planning on this. And then the rain delay comes, and here he is making a spot start. And he's been good in his last 2 outings for the Atlanta Braves that he's come up, and he's been good at AAA. And you're going to need Bryce Elder throughout the second half of the season. You're going to need him to come up and make some spot starts for you here and there to save the other guys. You're going to need the other people we've been talking about, Ian Anderson, who's working his way back, AJ Smith-Shawver, hopefully as well. You're going to need these guys to come in and make some starts for you. And Elder's been good. Just unfortunate, tonight, as you said, kind of up and down, had the one really bad inning where things got away from him, and he gave up some long balls. But again, I think it comes back to it. Bryce Elder, he has the stuff we know to be a back of the rotation starter. He can certainly get it done. Unfortunately, this game, he just wasn't able to do that.
Yeah, that's really kind of what you're looking for from him, is just to keep it manageable and as close to a quality start as you can get. This, unfortunately, was not one of those, but he got on a run where he was just racking up strikeouts, and you just kind of got that glimpse of what this guy can do when he is locked in. But unfortunately, that came in the same game in which he had an inning where it seemed like he may never get out of it. But that, of course, has kind of been the Jekyll and Hyde that has been Bryce Elder's run since really the second half of last year, and continued in this start. But again, that depth, you're going to need these guys, and you certainly need this offense to get itself going. We'll talk a lot more about that as we move along here on the Braves Postcast. We'll also go back through the things that went right in game one, the things that didn't go so right in game two, get you a look inside game three with a preview, and down on the farm, Jake mentioned it, Ian Anderson was back in action as well. All of those are things that we will touch on as the Braves Postcast continues. Summer travel is heating up, especially travel for baseball games, so it is time to explore those U.S. cities you always wanted to secretly know more about. We're talking about your rival cities. With hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com, you might just find your perfect stay, even in your baseball city's rival. From hotels that overlook the stadiums to family-friendly resorts, Booking.com has so many choices across the U.S. for your summer travel this MLB season, and the right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. Book today on Booking.com, on the site, or the Booking.com app. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Prize Picks is available in more than 30 U.S. states across the country, including California, Texas, and right here in Georgia. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's LOCKEDONMLB. That's the code on Prize Picks for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with Prize Picks. Well, Jake, we got a couple of box scores to get into for this one on this doubleheader Saturday for the Braves. First one's a pretty good one. The runs were a little bit harder to come by, but a well-pitched game on both sides, particularly what we were able to see from Charlie Morton was a very good sign in his first start of the second half, as 6 innings of one-run ball for him kept the Braves in this game and got his ERA down below 4 as well. Line on this one, St. Louis just 2 runs, 9 hits, no errors. The Braves 3 runs on just 6 hits and no errors as they improved to 54-42. Cards dropped to 50-47 in game one. Winning pitcher was Pierce Johnson in relief. The loser was Roycroft in relief for the St. Louis Cardinals. But as you look inside this start for Charlie, I think he's kind of, I don't want to say he's certainly not a forgotten man, but when you look at how much fanfare Chris Sale has gotten in coming over, the season that Max Fried is having, obviously the big surprise it was Reynaldo Lopez, who got to pitch in the All-Star game over the break as well. So congrats to him and for Max Fried for getting some action in there. It seems like Charlie is kind of like faded into the back like a bit of a wallflower, but as fourth starters go across Major League Baseball, I've said this before and I'll say it again, you can do a lot worse than Charlie Morton. And he certainly did a very nice job of keeping this game manageable and giving the Braves a chance to eventually come back and win this thing with a couple of runs in the 7th, courtesy of Eddie Rosario, and then manufacturing that run in the 10th.
Yeah, great stuff from Charlie Morton in this one. Needed it. Always in a game one of a doubleheader, you want to make sure that your starter goes out there, gives you some innings, and hopefully gives you a chance to win, which he did. But certainly giving you those innings, first game of doubleheader is really huge. Some winning extra innings, so you had to use some of that bullpen, and maybe it hurt you in the second game. But Charlie Morton just really, really good, as you said. One of the better 4 starters, I think, probably in baseball. Most teams would take him as their 4th starter. And he's had some ups and downs, certainly, but I feel like he's been mostly good. The curveball in this one, really good. He got a bunch of called strikes on it. Not as too many whiffs on it, but got a lot of weak contact, just 86.7 mile per hour average X velocity on that curveball that he threw 41% of the time. So good stuff from Charlie Morton. And correct me if I'm wrong, Grant, I apologize not looking this up. The run he gave up was the win triple, quote unquote, triple, right?
Triple. Yeah. The one that Adam Duvall was unable to get to there as of the box score that I printed out right before we got started here, because I am very old school and I print out everything. I still not changed to an error. That baffles me, because that is a play that Adam Duvall will flat out tell you, I have to make that play. When you lean over and the ball's coming towards you and you gator arm it, I mean, it's unfortunate, but it kind of was what it was there. And it was definitely an error. You want to give him a double, that's fine. A double and an error, a single and a two-base error, whatever you want to call it. I just find it very surprising that was called, not called an error and called a triple. But yeah, that put the Cardinals in the prime position to score their run, and that's exactly what they're able to do there. But either way, I think as you look at what Charlie was able to give you today, you're pretty happy with that. Dylan Lee did give up a run as well in this game, a home run by Nolan Arenado that made it a 2-0 game at that point. Then it was Eddie Rosario with the dramatics for the Braves in the bottom of the seventh, his 2-run homer that tied things up. And Atlanta, of course, in the 10th inning, scratching across that run, courtesy of Ozzie Albies' sac fly. We talked a little bit about the manufacturing runs, the bunts that we saw in this, the fact that that's rather rare for Atlanta. I know, Jake, we're probably not going to see them utilize sacrifice bunts left, right, and center every single night, but this was a day in which they needed to in game one. Then in game two, you see it's more and more power. Marcell Ozuna's playing a little home run derby. Austin Riley, Eddie Rosario get into the act, but a lot of solo shots, unfortunately, for the Braves. They just haven't been able to put all the links of the chain together. And that's something we can get into in a moment that they're going to have to figure out a way to do here in this second half. Get some consistency with a good run of the lineup, whether that's 4, 5, 6 hitters in a row that are just kind of doing their part to be on base. So when these home runs come, they do a little bit more damage.
Yeah, the Braves aren't going to lose too many games when they hit 4 home runs in a game, but all of them of the solo variety, like you talked about. So, being able to get some players on base in front of those obviously would be really huge. But 5 home runs on the day kind of speaks to what we were talking about earlier. The home runs do seem to be up, and I feel like overall that's going to benefit this Braves team who, obviously, as we again touched on earlier, they still make a lot of hard contact. And so, again, getting the home run ball back for the Braves and that way that they were able to get back into this game and get to Sonny Gray and score, with those 3 home runs later in the game to make it a 1-run game. It's just if you get that one more run and tie it up, maybe the bullpen situation changes a little bit. Not going to get on Grant Holmes too much in this one. He did a great job keeping them in there, but then letting things kind of get away in the 9th inning. If the Braves tie it up there, you're probably going to go with a different arm.
Yeah, and I will also stipulate that if you're not playing a doubleheader that day, I don't think they're going to try to squeeze a 3rd inning out of Grant Holmes. And the fact that it's not just the 2 games today, it's a run of 17 straight games out of the All-Star break. You have to kind of stick to your plan. You can't just start, throwing everybody out there, throwing 4 or 5 relievers a night. The next thing you know, within about 4 days, you have burned through your bullpen, and it's going to become even more difficult to continue to navigate. It's not a fun answer. It's not a fun discussion. For Grant Holmes has been very good in his time with the Braves. But that 3rd inning, I think, and we saw a couple of hard hit balls prior to that, it looked like the Cardinals were finally starting to maybe figure out a couple of things. So something else that worked against the Braves a bit in that second game. Game 1, I'd be remiss not to mention 3 more hits for Travis d'Arnaud. Looks like he's figuring some things out at the plate. Eddie Rosario with the 2-run homer in that one. Austin Riley had a hit and a walk there. And a good night for Austin Riley in the second contest. The homer among his 2 hits. He continues to swing the bat well. That's a huge thing for the Braves. And I put this down as we face more of the offensive questions that we brought into the break and saw them here in these first couple of games. Some guys, they simply need to get going. Matt Olson is a pretty obvious one. Hitless in this doubleheader. That drops his average down to 224 on the year, hitting below 140 now in his last 25 games. Been a tough run for him. I know I talked about that last week as well, not to get on him and not that he doesn't know it as well. He knows it better than anybody, but they've got to get him going. And Ozzie Albies has not been the power threat that he was a year ago. And it's pretty tough with Jared Kelenic also going through an 0 for 25 skid at the plate at the top, though he's been very good at the leadoff spot. You just don't have anybody setting the table for Austin Riley and for Marcell Ozuna on a regular basis.
Yeah, it's tough right now. You look at the lineup, and it's Kelenic at 720 OPS, Albies 711, and then Matt Olson now up under 700 at 699. So it's just not getting a lot of help with Riley, who is completely locked in at this point, and Ozuna, who's been locked in pretty much all season long. So you got to get those other guys back. And Obviously with Michael Harris, not returning till maybe August at this point, I know we'll probably touch on, but you got to get Albies going. You got to get Olsen going. Those are the two guys specifically. I mean, we'd love to get Kelenic back to where he was. I think that was more of a surprise thing. You'll take it certainly and run with it, but Albies and Olsen, those are your two horses in the middle of the lineup that have to be hitting like you expect them to.
Yeah, and Ozzie now at this point on pace for about a dozen home runs this year. That's an extremely strange and low total for him. Olsen on pace for just over 20 home runs on the season with just, 65 games to go now. This is not a small sample size. When we start doing those paces, they've got to find ways to not just hit the home runs, but to get back to being the powerful hitters that the Braves need to be from a productivity standpoint in this one as well. The Game 2 loss, the Braves did rack up 9 hits, 2 for Eddie Rosario, 2 home runs for Marcell Ozuna. He just keeps on keeping on as he has pushed his home run total up to 28 on the season. So after really bringing his career back from the brink with a 40-homer campaign a year ago, he's about to crack the 30th home run of the year, possibly before we even get to the month of August. So Marcell Ozuna, again, driving force of the Braves offense. Austin Riley helping him out as well. Jarred Kelenic did snap that scoreless streak with a triple and scored a run immediately as the Braves jumped on the board in the first inning, tying up the Cardinals. But a 4 spot in the second, a 3 spot in the ninth, really what separated these two clubs in Game 2 of this series. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about this series and what the Braves need to do on Sundays. They've got Spencer Schwellenbach on the mound. We need to go down on the farm to talk a bit about Ian Anderson. And, of course, we need to touch on the Michael Harris situation, as the Braves would love to have him back in the mix sooner than later. But it doesn't sound like it's going to be immediately, but still could be trending in the right direction. We'll get into all of that as the Braves Postcast continues. With Stitch Fix, you get a stylist who understands your style, size, and budget. They do all the shopping for you, and it's the easiest way to update your wardrobe this season. Easily upgrade your wardrobe with a professional stylist that helps you find new on-trend favorites that work for you. And if you don't love something, you just send it back. Shipping, returns, and exchanges are always free, and it's style that makes you feel as good as you look. Now's the best time to get started at StitchFix.com/MLB. Get $100 off with $25 off of each of your first 4 fixes for a limited time. That's StitchFix.com/MLB for $100 off. StitchFix.com/MLB. You must redeem within 7 days of sign-up. An offer does not include kids' fixes. I love sports, and I love them so much, I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs have wound down, we have fewer games, and sports aren't quite sportsing the way we want them to. But if you're a baseball person, you get a game just about every day, and FanDuel lets me keep up with the sports whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app, dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood, and this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right, something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Head on over to FanDuel.com/LockedOn and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Well, Jake, let's talk a little bit about the closing out of this series, the first series after the All-Star break, as the Braves are at home against the St. Louis Cardinals for 3. Then the Cincinnati Reds will come rolling into town after that, but the Braves would like to start out their second half with a series win over St. Louis, and they need Spencer Schwellenbach to help them out. I touched on this earlier, the really tough stretch out of the break here. 17 straight games. Obviously, Friday was rained out, but that did not help the Braves because it just meant they had to kick off that stretch with a doubleheader. But Cincinnati following St. Louis. Then you got the New York Mets and the Milwaukee Brewers just to close out the month of July. So you have the Cardinals, a wild card team, Cincinnati, who is at least in the conversation. The New York Mets have certainly inserted themselves into the wild card, and the Brewers, who lead the Central. Jake, these are all clubs that have their eyes on October, and they're all teams that could be looking to make trades at the deadline. But I continue to wonder, are all these clubs going to be able to figure out what they want to do, buy or sell, in the next 10 or so days?
Yeah, who's going to be available with all these teams that are still in the race? I mean, I think that's something a lot of GMs are trying to figure out at the moment, is what teams are actually selling and what's available from these teams. So the Braves are playing a lot of them right now who have a lot to play for. Cardinals obviously are in a wild card spot. Reds want to be. The Mets have been playing really good lately. I know they were in a wild card spot going into the break, but I know they lost the game on Friday coming out. But either way, I mean, it's a bunch of teams right here that you're playing that are playing for something, and so are the Braves. So it's no easy task here for the Atlanta Braves out of the break. And like you said, with these stretch of games, having to start that out with a doubleheader, a lot going against them, but it's a good team. The Braves are just got to calm down and get it done on the field. And, got the split on Saturday. Hopefully they can get it done on Sunday.
Yeah, top three wild card clubs are the Braves, then the Cardinals. Then you have the Mets, who are basically percentage points ahead of the Arizona Diamondbacks for that third and final spot. Half a game out of that. How about this? The Pittsburgh Pirates. The Padres are one game out. Then the Giants, 3.5, because the Reds at 4, Cubs at 4.5, even the Nationals at 5. I mean, it's not all over for them, though you expect a couple of those clubs over the next 10 or so days, if they're not able to get some wins strung together, they may go ahead and make that decision to see what they could get for a piece here or there, though it may not be a complete teardown for any of these clubs, depending on how you look at it. But either way, the Braves will try to figure out what they need at the trade deadline, and everyone's going to have to figure out if they're doing some buying, doing some selling, and if there's enough out there that they're able to get this deal done. It will be nice to get some reinforcements from within, though. The Braves would love to have Michael Harris back as soon as they can. Sounds like he still hasn't been able to ramp all the way up to sprinting, which means he's going to have himself a rehab assignment that's going to last, I would imagine, what do you say, Jake, 4 or 5 games at least after missing a month and a half by the point that he could get cleared. If that happens in the next week, I don't really know that it's going to happen soon, but it not necessarily, I don't think they've kicked the can so far down the road that they're not expecting Harris to impact them maybe by the turn of the next calendar month.
Yeah, and him being a center fielder as well, you want to make sure that hamstring is fully good to go, as he'll be roaming center field. So it may take even longer than that, because I'm sure they probably won't play him full games the first couple of times. But either way, it's still going to be a little bit for Michael Harris, and need to get him back and need to get his bat going. I mean, even for him, like a lot of Braves hitters, he was struggling even before the injury. But if you can get him back and get his bat going, certainly will be a huge boost to this lineup, especially if Kelenic struggles continue. You may need Harris at the top of the order to kind of get somebody else there that can get on base. So looking for Michael Harris to come back and have a huge impact whenever that may be, but certainly don't want to press it with a hamstring issue, because you bring him back too quickly, that player's up again. Now you're talking about, will he be ready for, the end of the season and postseason?
As somebody else the Braves are hoping to have ready at some point here in the second half at the big league level is Ian Anderson, who was activated from the injured list down in Gwinnett and pitched on Saturday. 3 2/3 innings, 4 earned runs for him there, including a homer. Did strike out 4, only 1 walk. He's up to 70 pitches now. I know we can look at the line and the results and say, well, that wasn't a very good outing, but you continue to see that pitch count climb, and you'll continue to, I think, see the confidence of Ian Anderson being rebuilt as he continues to get himself back to where he needs to be in order to maybe get some innings for the Braves, who would very much like to keep supplementing their rotation at the very least to allow Chris Sale and Reynaldo Lopez to have that extra day at times. And now you might be looking at other guys that, if you have a chance to reset your rotation, particularly when you're playing 17 straight games, you might just be tempted to take that here or there. So it'll be interesting to see where Ian Anderson fits in. But a big step, being activated from the injured list, no longer on a rehab assignment. He'll just pitch in Gwinnett until the Braves decide that they're ready to bring him up.
And with guys like that, obviously coming back, you don't really want to look at the line too much. One thing I do look at, though, is just a 1 walk. It's something that Ian Anderson has struggled with in the past, but just coming off injury, he's getting his work in, stretching out at that, right now at the moment. And the home run he gave up, I think, was to the White Sox top prospect in Colson Montgomery. So good to see Ian Anderson back out there, continuing to get his work done. And as we've talked about, Braves are going to need these pitchers to come up and make some starts throughout the rest of the season.
Well, Friday's rainout messed with the pitching plan for the weekend as the Braves reshuffled their rotation. Spencer Schwellenbach is going to get the ball in Sunday's finale, looking to build on a strong showing in the first half. He closed it out extremely well in his last couple of starts, allowing just 1 run over the 2 combined and facing some really good lineups as well, Jake. Game 3 of this series, Schwellenbach looking to even up his record. He's 3-4 with a 4.43 ERA. Miles Michaelis will be on the mound, 7-8 with a 5.13. So it'll be interesting to see how Schwellenbach is able to do as the Braves continue to rely on him and where he fits in over the final couple of months, because he's already approaching the high water mark, or has surpassed the high water mark of innings thrown in a single season. How far do the Braves want to push him, and what might they like to do to maybe give him a little bit of extra time here or there if they need to?
Yeah, well, they seem pretty confident they were going to start him coming out of the break for that Friday game had it not got rained out. So maybe that tells you a little something about it. But I can't wait to see Schwellenbach pitch. I think he's one of the better stories for this Braves team this year, where there's been a lot of disappointments on the offensive side of things. Some exciting players have been taken out in Strider and Acuna and Harris that make this team so fun to watch. I think Schwellenbach has been one of the best parts of the season and what he's been able to do, and what the future just looks like for this kid, as we continue to say, that it's just growing at the big league level. So I can't wait to see him get out there and pitch again. But either way, I want to see this offense put some more runs on the board again against a starting pitcher in McAuley that has really struggled this season.
Yeah, a 5 ERA for him. And there have been a couple of Cardinal starters that have been having some rough going lately as well. I know Sonny Gray has had a very good year overall, but he'd been touched up a bit coming in. The Braves hit some homers off him. Perhaps that will have them lined up well to feel like they can have some good swings on Sunday and take a series from the Cardinals to open the second half. Spencer Schwellenbach against Miles Michaelis, 1:35 p.m. Eastern time is the first pitch from Truist Park. That's going to wrap us up for this edition of the Braves Postcast. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta here on YouTube and leave those likes and comments. Share the show with a friend and subscribe to Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcast. Once again, the Braves split a doubleheader against the St. Louis Cardinals. They'll go for a series victory on Sunday. For Jake Mastroianni, I'm Grant McAuley. Until next time, so long, everyone.